This was a new thing. Interesting. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sophia, and I'm going to be your host today. And with me, I have my colleague Daniel from the US and Lothar from Austria. And they are going to talk about product ownership today with you guys. And we are not going to share so much slides with you today, but we're more going to have it as a discussion. So please use the chat to interact with us throughout the webinar. You can set the settings to panelists and attendees so that we are all seeing what you are writing. And for any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A so we can monitor your questions and take them as we go. Greetings from a very rainy Helsinki. I hope, Daniel, I see some sun at your house at least, and Lothar also, maybe a little bit of sun. So I'm gonna let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit more and kick off the session. And in a while, we will also get to know the audience, but I will let you guys present yourselves first.
Go ahead, Lothar.
Okay, hello, good afternoon from my side. My name is Lothar. I am Agile coach working for Agile 42, based in Austria. So mainly working with our German clients, but also other clients in Central Europe. By now working with a couple of product owners, of course, on how to develop their products, and looking forward to discuss with you what current challenges are that come up when we talking with product owners, when we try to support them in developing their products, and looking forward to your questions.
And my name's Daniel Lynn. I'm based in Denver in the US. So I'm working as a coach and trainer here for, I guess it's been about 6 years or a little over 6 years. I've been with Agile 42. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. I've been in each of the different accountabilities in Scrum as a Scrum Master, as a developer inside of the development team, and as a product owner. By far, the product owner is probably the hardest. And so I'm excited to do this topic and see what questions come up and see what we can dig into.
Great. Should we be starting maybe with seeing also who is in our audience today? So we would be super interested to know how long you guys have been working as product owners. So I'm going to launch a poll for you guys so you get a few seconds to answer that, and let's take it from there. So you should be able to see the poll right now. So it seems we have quite a good mix here, guys. We have a few that have been less than a year, some that are 1 to 3 years, and some that are a little bit more advanced. And then there's also quite many actually who are not product owners and have different roles, but that's also nice to have you guys anyway attending the webinar. Yeah. So I think that's kind of a cool mix. We can be sharing the results also with you guys so that you can have a look who is in the room. Make sense, guys?
Yeah, you know what? Maybe I'm sure it'll all fly by, but we can glance through it as it comes by. For all those people who are not a product owner, maybe type what your role is in chat in just a couple words, and we'll get a quick glimpse at it.
Yeah. There's a lot of people saying coaches and Scrum Masters and trainers and stuff. So yeah, we have a good mix here. The second poll that we would also, while you are typing your roles, is to know a little bit of what kind of a company you are working in. So how big is the company that you are working in at the moment? So that's going to be the next question. There is also a very cool balance here of small companies, mid-sized companies, and big companies. So in just a few seconds, you guys will also see the results. Yeah, this was a little bit quicker sharing. So here you see very big companies, over 500 people, but also quite equally the amount of a little bit of smaller companies. Do we want to take also now, guys, the poll about if they are working with products and teams and how many once we are going? We can maybe take that one as well. Yeah. So we really get to know our peeps. So the guys now that are product owners can maybe answer on these questions.
Okay, well, that's a quite nice mixed audience.
Yeah. I think it's going to give a lot of interesting discussions also, since the audience is so different, but that's nice. So let me just share also the results from this poll so that everyone can see here that some are working on multiple products with one team and with one product on many teams and so on. So that's really nice. Thanks, guys, for sharing with us this. This gives us a lot of details now for the presentation. So I'm going to hand it over, guys, now to you, so you can start the discussions with the audience.
Yeah. So I know that we're opening up to questions pretty much right away. But while questions are coming in, right, you can kind of post them, and Fee is going to kind of aggregate them and ask them out to us. But to give you a little time to put some questions in, I'm going to ask Lothar something about about what was just posted there. So I saw that a majority of the people here are working with multiple products with one team. And the new version of the Scrum guide that came out at the end of last year, actually, it changed some of the wording around product goal. And it said you have to have a goal, and then that's your focus until you either complete that goal or drop it and move to another goal. So I don't know what, Lothar, do you have any thoughts on how you reconcile that with multiple products on one team, which is something that I've experienced plenty. I know that's common.
Well, that's a quite challenging question. Regarding the question of the product goal, of course, it makes sense to have like one product goal for each product, because when you're working on multiple products, it may be that they're in different stage of maturity. So maybe you have something which is like one of your products is quite mature, and well, like let's call it at the end of its life cycle. And on the other hand, you're working on something quite new, quite innovative, and you think like this one thing is going to replace the other product in a couple of years. So of course, it makes sense to have like the shared goal, or like a separated goal for each of them. And then the product owner comes to another challenge. You have to balance all these kind of things, like how to balance the one product with the other one. How much would we like to invest? Like how much of our capacity should we invest in innovation and in the future? But how much does it need to maintain our existing products? And at the end of the day, it's most likely these existing products who are paying our bills or paying our salaries at the end of the month. So you will need to maintain both. The one to keep the money in this month, and the other one to ensure that you're able to get some money in future. So it's not only about like having, when you're working on multiple goals, it's not about multiple products. It's not about only about like having multiple goals, but also about like, okay, how to handle them, and how does this look like in your product backlog? How would you handle it like in a sprint? Does it make sense to have like one sprint just for one product? Or are you in a situation where you have to handle both of them at the same time, more or less? That's challenging questions for product owners.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that until that particular poll came up. And I think back to, I did a LESS class a couple of years ago, and the teacher in that class really challenged us to think about breadth of the term product. Right. So a lot of times when we say, well, we have multiple products, we might actually have, we may actually be talking about one product with multiple facets. So if I think of something that probably most people on the call can relate to, personal banking, right? We might say, well, I have this checking account and I have savings and I have this particular type of credit card and I'm which I think usually we talk about those as though they're different products, but in the end, what he challenged us on is to think, well, your actual product is, personal banking. And these are all important things that someone wants in personal banking, and so that was kind of that's another thing to throw in there too, is maybe sometimes we need to broaden our definition of what the product is, to incorporate a number of different aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. That brings us to a good question that was just raised in the chat by Regina, who asked, like, what do we consider a product? And we had this conversation with one of our clients who had a quite nice definition on it. I need to remember it. But at the end of the day, what they said, a product may be anything physical or a service that someone in their company may buy, or they may take an abo on it and say they would like to subscribe for it, or they can buy it or use a subscription for it. They get anything for it, they need to pay for it, and they can stop subscribing for it. And this opens the thing that the product can be either like something physical or a service. And it can be sold to an internal or an external. But at the end of the day, people, like, when they use this thing, they know that there is like what they're using and what it is for, or what it stands for, how it supports them, and how to handle it and where to address if they have any kind of questions on it.
Cool.
See
that a little time's passed. I wonder if Sophia, if you have questions that we should tackle from the audience.
Yeah, we can take another question that came also in the Q&A. Can you be a PO across two teams working on multiple products, or is that another role completely?
Well, maybe, Daniel, I'm going to start on that. We had this conversation at a client, and they started working on Scrum, and so people said, okay, well, Scrum team is less than 10 person, and they started with one team having one product owner, but at some time the product just grew together with its market, and there were more customers on it. So at some point they had to split the Scrum team and say, okay, well, there are two separated teams. So one of the obvious questions they had is, do we need a second product owner, and do we need a second Scrum Master? Because that's at the end of the day what the questions that came up. And so we tried to jeopardize the question a little bit by saying, well, if you have like one joint product, you have a joint customer or a joint customer base, and you will deliver like integrated together with the power or the workforce of two software development teams or even hardware development teams, then it's quite okay to have like one product owner, because at the end of the day, what you're going to need is like one face to the customer, no matter how many people there are in the back doing the development work.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you're having a situation where you have like two different teams working on two different products with two different customer bases, your product owner, you don't maybe not have like one product, one main customer, but multiple, and the product owner has to handle multiple customers with completely different interests for each of these products. Well, then product ownership for two different teams will be quite challenging thing for you.
Yeah. Right, because you're going to lose. I mean, you can only split your time so many ways, right? Yeah, I think one of the things I would maybe cap that with and add on with is working with a client recently that had a number of different teams, right? So let's take this out further past just like two teams. And what they had was I think it was just shy of 10 teams, and each team had 3 or 4 products, and then you had POs across a bunch of those teams. It was sort of mix and matched. So if we're just talking about like one PO working with two teams, especially in the circumstance like you're talking about, right, that can make sense, right? It may be the most logical thing to keep a common face towards the customer, keep one mindset, or around that PO accountability. But be careful as it grows and grows and grows. Are you just creating weird interdependencies where eventually it can grow to the point where all the teams need to coordinate with each other constantly because they all have a little bit of a hand in the pie, and same with all the product owners kind of have a little bit. And so everyone kind of overlaps with each other, and then you become deadlocked on decisions. So when you have that, POs across multiple teams, potentially multiple products in those teams, that sort of thing, just be careful that you don't, as things grow, accidentally grow tons of complexity, where you're tying teams and POs together just to do it, right? Without adding any value to doing it.
Cool. Are there then any most important watch outs or pitfalls as a product owner? Can you list something?
Well, let's take it on. Let's divide it into two parts. I take the inner view, Daniel, maybe you later the outside view.
Okay.
We had a conversation when we prepared ourselves for the webinar and thought about the videos that each of us done during the month. And I was talking to Daniel regarding my thoughts on his video, because this was something that came up in a client discussion this month. At the end of the day, a typical situation that we're facing when we're introducing Scrum, for example, is that at the very beginning, we say, okay, well, let's start doing Scrum. So we separate all responsibilities, saying, okay, Daniel, you're the product owner now, Fia, you're developer, and Lothar, you're a Scrum master, and each of us have our responsibilities and things that we should do. And at some point, we figure out, like, is it only the product owner who should be allowed to work on the product backlog? Or does it make sense to share some kind of accountabilities, for example? And in the first step, you start dividing things. And then you start bringing things together. And then in the next step, you start thinking about, like, okay, how to handle like a shared goal. Because at the end of the day, it's not like the product owner's goal. And he joins the sprint planning, says, guy, that's our goal for next 2 weeks, or this is our product goal. But you need to get in any situation together with your team where you say, okay, well, guys, we are following a joint goal. And everything that comes along this process is like, that's full of pitfalls. But the major pitfall for a product owner on the internal view, I'd say, is that you're not able to, how to say, overcome that position to say, okay, well, this is my goal instead of this is our goal. That's one of the most challenging things regarding the interview, let's say so.
Yeah, and externally, time. I think maybe that's both internal and external. I've seen people try to be efficient with product owners' time, either by giving them product ownership of multiple things, or be like, well, here's your product ownership, but here's also your day job. And man, that's rough. Product ownership's a really hard job when it's done right. And you'll be working long hours anyway, even if you're just doing that. So I think that's a really key thing is, especially if maybe you're not the product owner, but you're a business owner, you're, an executive, and you're trying to figure out how to bring product ownership in, give them time to really explore the role of product ownership. The best product owners that I've seen are constantly evangelizing. They're constantly out engaging with customers, understanding their customer needs, whether those are internal customers or external customers. They understand their customer needs and are getting it out, whether that's through marketing to a very large number of customers or reaching out to key clients, whatever that is. They're out there, they're talking to people, sharing what new features are coming out, getting them excited about it, and then also representing that view back in, ranging conversations between the rest of the Scrum team and key customers who are going to give good feedback so that they get better context about what features need to be developed and why and how they're going to be used. And there's so much that a product owner can tackle to really enrich the Scrum team, enrich the product that they're building. And if you try to be too efficient with time, they're just not going to have a chance to do any of that stuff, and the product will suffer for it.
Maybe one additional thought, like piggybacking on the thing that you mentioned regarding the time. What we're doing, like when we're talking about Scrum, by the way, Daniel, congratulations, you're product owner right now. And like we announced to everybody in the company, Daniel's now new product owner, and there we go. And we say like, okay, well, as of today, there you go. To my experience, product ownership is something that grows. Because at the end of the day, it seems like it's your baby. Your product becomes your baby, and you're going through these situations where you have a very great idea and the customer appreciates it. And you're also going through these situations where you have a very great idea and your customer says that sucks. And you need to go through these moments of joy, or like the highs and the lows and all these things, through tough moments with your team, tough moments with your customer, to become a product owner and to grow a sense of ownership. And what we see is, or what I would say, one of the pitfalls is you need to give people the time to go through these experiences, especially as we're having like a couple of Scrum Masters and Agile coaches in there who are asking, how can we support our product owners in their role? This is product ownership is something that they'll learn over time.
And I will put a specific point on that before we move off of this question. Product owners need time to think. So that's to your point, right? They need to be able to go through those highs and lows, and they need downtime to think. I think a lot of times in our businesses, we focus on, I'm productive if I'm busy doing a task. And that's something just like executives need time to think about what's going on in their company, and they need some downtime to process. So do product owners. And that might be something, especially for new product owners, to remind them of. Give yourself time to just sit with the information you have and reflect on it and decide what to do with it.
There are a few questions now about the product owner role and the product owner as a person. So like the qualities and characteristics of the product owner are very broad. And they might require some kind of balance. That's what at least also the comments here ask for. So should the product owner be more technical or more a people person in your guys' opinion? Or how should he or she be?
I'll take a first swing at it. I've seen great product owners who are technical. I've seen great product owners who are not, but have the domain knowledge and the ability to network. And I've seen the opposite. I've seen terrible product owners that are both technical and not technical. The cool thing about product ownership is you can bring a lot of different skills to bear into it, as long as you're getting the goal out of it, right? Connecting the right people, driving out the right information, learning the right things, and developing that product. You're going to bring whatever skills you have to it. Your ability to apply your skills to that role is much more important than what those skills are.
Yeah, fully go with you. At the end of the day, product owners are in that gap that we said, okay, well, they have to have technical and domain knowledge. They have to be good with numbers and figures, and they have to be good in communications. And at least like the last two things are something which are normally completely contradictory. Because there are some people who are good with numbers and figures, but bad communicators. And we see people who are quite good in communications, but they're not into numbers persons. So as a product owner, you have to be a little bit of both. And the challenging thing is not like, are you good in the one thing and how does it influence the others? But the challenging thing when you become a product owner is like, what's your background, and do you have the ability and the willingness to learn the other things? To like, let's call it the bare minimum, where you're able to connect to other people. And if you come from communications, you need to get to that point where you understand what the technicians want from you or what they are telling you.
And I'm curious, I'm looking at the QA too, and one of them is from, I hope it is the right pronunciation of your name, Jason, I hope. But about, I have seen the PO role going from more traditional owner to more operational role. Is that what you were keying off of, Sophia, that question?
Yes.
So I'm, one of the things that I want to key on that is I've seen really similar trends where it's gone from product owner to backlog administrator in a lot of different organizations. And a lot of times what's happening there is before it's ever come to the product owner, we've already decided the project that we're going to do. At least I'm speaking to my experience. I don't know if that effectively represents your experience, but but I've seen that a lot where things go more operational because we've already decided this is the project we're going to do, this is the implementation we're going to do, this is the solution, and I just need you to put this into a backlog for us. And then that person is more administering the backlog and helping the team understand the pre-existing project than they are developing a product. And I don't want to condemn that. Like, if that's what your company needs and that's what you're doing, okay, I'll trust, we're all professionals. I'll trust that you've made that decision. It's the right thing to do. But I will say that you're leaving some of Scrum on the table, right? Part of the value of Scrum is not just the ability to do work, but is the ability to, dynamically grow really rich products. And so you're not leveraging that part of product ownership where you really explore what do the customers need and how do I deliver value quickly and pivot based on the needs of the customers and how the market moves. So that move to more operational, I see a lot of that too. And it's, if it's giving you value, great. Just realize what the value that you're not capitalizing on by really giving ownership of the product to them.
Thanks. There has also been a debate whether the product owner role is still required in Scrum or not. Do you have any thoughts about this, guys?
I'm really curious when you say required in Scrum, like what is it that you're like, can you have a team that functions without a product owner, or should it be kicked out of the Scrum guide? And I don't know if like on chat, those are two very different questions.
Maybe
you can pick which one you want to answer before.
Could you rephrase the question? And we're jumping to not like I can't find it in the chat neither. And if you could rephrase the question, we pay back or come back on that in a few minutes, if that's okay for you.
So I'm just going to spotlight. By the way, on this last question, I'm going to spotlight something that Michael Berman posted, who is an awesome product owner himself, and he's in the chat. He posted something about, hey, technical product owners, the concern that one of the things they can do is step in and do the developer's job, right? I'm going to decide the implementation for you, and then you just do it, right? And disempower the rest of the Scrum team. And they may spend too much time with that product and not enough time with the customer. And I think they're just really great points to make. You can be a technical product owner and not do those things, in which case that would be a good asset. But just be careful of that. There's a temptation. I know when I was a product owner, because I was coming from a technical space, that was a temptation I always had to resist.
I think you got a comment on if the product owner is required in Scrum, being that that there was the debate that there's no single person to make the decisions, rather PO responsibilities blending with the dev team. Does it help you guys to answer the question?
Yeah, it makes the question more complex. So let me think on that a second. So the product owners come in with a different perspective. I think in high performing teams, the product owner should rarely have to make unilateral decisions, right? I mean, sometimes it happens and you need a tiebreaker, right? Or, and that might fall to the product owner, especially if it's a customer concern. But a lot of really high performing teams who have worked together for a long time that I've seen and worked with, the product owner is rarely like a decision maker for the team. What they're really doing is bringing in a perspective that's different from the rest of the Scrum team, because the developers, I use as a broad term, right? The product developers are thinking about the implementation. They're thinking about how it's going to come together. And the product owner is thinking so much more about why. And both of those perspectives are valuable. But the product owner needs a strong voice, because in a team of, say, 10 people, they are the one person who is always supposed to be thinking about why, which is why we look for a strong voice in that product owner. So I hope that answers that. Your question then becomes very complex, because we get into like team dynamics, and ideally I don't want one person just being the decision maker. I want it to be collaborative, so we get both perspectives in there effectively. Right. And I want like unilateral decisions to be fairly rare.
Maybe another thought on it. What can be, or like what can happen if we're getting closer to the point of a high-performing team is that the kind of decisions that are taken are switching from the product owner role more to the developers. So it may be that the product owner just sets, like, let's say, a sprint goal or an iteration goal, and the team thinks about like the entire everything that needs to be done to achieve this kind of goal. What gives the product owner the possibility to look at other things, for example, the strategy, where is your market going, trends, stuff like that, and focus more on the exterior. At the end of the day, what I would see is that there is a possibility that things which we would, a classical product owner assume to do, go into the team's responsibility, because they're getting like more into a high-performing mode, or more into getting in self-management in how to achieve goals. And by as this is going along, the product owner has the capacity and the time to look at other things like innovation, market observation, and getting the time to think of what's happening like day after tomorrow. I've never seen a product owner who said, okay, well, I understand my entire market. I know about like all the things that are going to happen in the next couple of, like, let's say 6 months on a midterm perspective, and 1 to 2 years on a short, long haul perspective. And I have all my thoughts ready and about like how to set the product strategy for the next 2 years. So what happens is, like, if the team's taking more responsibilities of these things, where you say, okay, well, this would be what a classical product owner would do, is you're buying the product owner time to have a look on these kind of things.
So you could tell it's a good question, because now we have two coaches like, ooh, let's think about this. Let's poke the different sides of it. So we could probably talk for the next hour about that. Let me give something to point you to, that everyone on this call can kind of explore it for themselves a bit. In the Scrum guide now, we have 3 different parts. We start with the why, where we're supposed to have a proposed goal for the sprint. Where do we hope to get to at the end of the sprint? And then from that goal, we talk about the what. What are the backlog items that fulfill that goal? And then we go into the how in the third part of sprint planning, where we talk about, okay, now that we understand where we're trying to get to, what backlog items help us get there, now what's our kind of first pass plan at how to deliver on that? And so that's a really good just framing an example of that relationship between the product owner and the rest of the Scrum team, specifically the developers, where it shifts from why eventually all the way to how. And so when we ask that question, do we need a product owner? Could the rest of the team have that conversation without a product owner? Yeah, they probably could, but the product owner is delivering some real key value, especially early on, setting the stage in sprint planning. So I'll leave it at that. And then for everyone else on the call, right, that's something you can mull over and consider further on that question.
There's a good question also in the Q&A. So if you're new to product ownership or product management, what do you need to know? What are the first steps? Is there trainings, books to read, or how do you get going with this?
That's a great question. What do you need to know?
Or what do you need to understand during the first months of your new role?
I mean, at the end of the day, there is like let's say when we talk about agile product ownership, there is a joint understanding of things that you would need to cover. Let's take, for example, the learning objectives of a typical Scrum Master class or certified Scrum Master class, where you say, okay, well, this is the most important vocabs and the most important things that you should know. What is a product backlog? How does it work? What are the responsibilities of a product owner? Just like to get an insight about like, okay, what's part of my role. Then the other thing is the question of like, what is your product about? What is your product domain about? What are the most important stakeholders? Just like to the moment that you're entering your new role, like you're looking left and you're looking right and know like what's going on around you. How is your system working? What are your key customers, your dependencies, stuff like that? Because that's what you're going to need to understand in the first days. And at the end of the day, and this is, as mentioned in the videos, one of the first questions that I'd ask product owners, or you're starting the conversation, is what is your product and where is it going? Because this is something that you will need to enlighten people, give them a shared understanding. And if you're new to the role, it may be that you don't know everything by heart, or that the guy who just promoted you has a strong understanding of where he sees the product going. So it may be important to interview stakeholders, management, people like that. Like, what's your understanding of the product? Where should we go? And please don't only interview one person, but multiple of them, and like generate your picture of where the product should go into the future.
And I'm going to add this isn't really this isn't product ownership, but as anything, right? If you're new to product ownership, then I think it's really important to acknowledge you're new to product ownership, right? You're not going to knock out of the park, on day one. You should focus on all of those things that Lothar just talked about. Another thing, I recommend this for any product owner, but especially for a new product owner, just find a mirror and practice saying, I don't know, over and over again, because it's the most valuable thing that you can say as a product owner, right? Be open about where you know something and where you don't. And if someone says, hey, I have this question for you, don't be afraid to say, well, I don't know. Maybe here's where I might go to find out. Do you have any other suggestions about where to find out? If you're working with a really experienced Scrum team, who's been doing this for a couple of years, they really know their space. Well, cool, leverage that knowledge, leverage their experience, and ask them, what do you need from me? What are the most important things that I can bring to this conversation that maybe you don't have time to because you're busy building it? Similarly, if there's an organization asking you to pick up product ownership of a particular area, what are they expecting out of you? So just like I wouldn't, hand a brand new software developer a whole application, go, here you go, build it. Or I wouldn't hand a new director the next Marvel movie and just let them run with it and hope for the best. If you're new to product ownership, hopefully no one's throwing you onto the flagship product and saying, good luck, here you go. Reach out to the other product owners, see what they're doing, look for some mentorship opportunities. And he's a big name. This feels a little bit cliche, but I always point people to Mike Cohn. He releases weekly blogs. He's written a couple of books, and the guy really knows his stuff. Here, I'll type in the name for anyone who's not familiar in the chat. But if you look up anything from Mike Cohn, right, I get his blogs all the time and read them. I like them. Definitely look at it. Right.
Cool. Then there's another question. Do you coach/teach product owners to ruthlessly prioritize to drive better products or services focus?
Yes, I guess, what is the ruthlessly prioritize? I think you can't pursue that enough, right? Like what's the most important thing to have, and let's focus on that. Where you can get tripped up is, what are you prioritizing buy. And if you get too narrowly focused on one thing, you know, there are a lot of things that lead to product success, like technical quality. If you have the most amazing features and none of them work half the time, not going to help you, right? What does the market need at the time? What's the technical quality? Are you building a solid foundation, right? There are so many things that come in. Are there security concerns? You know, people rush products to market and then they get compromised and then they get sued because all kinds of customer personal data gets out into the world. So yes, definitely ruthlessly prioritize what you're focusing on to drive out value. Just realize that there are many forms of value.
Maybe one more thought regarding the poll that we've done at the beginning. Like most of you said that you're working on multiple products with one team. So at the end of the day, it may be quite likely that you're working in a DevOps environment where you have to do product development and product operations at the same time, which of course follow different targets. And at the end of the day, ruthless prioritization does not mean, well, at the end of the day, we're doing DevOps, we're having, let's say, 20% slack for operations. And if this is planned in sprint planning, and we already used our 20% for operations, and then there is a critical thing coming up, there is no possibility to do the critical thing. The only thing like you need to understand, for example, as a product owner in DevOps environment is, what does it make to you if you're not able to cope with these kind or balance this kind of differences? And at the end of the day, of course, it happens to any product owner that you have planned something and you prioritize something, and you thought that things will go like that, and at some point the shit hits the fan, and you find out that you have to change your priority. And well, at the end of the day, what we have to do in this situation with product owners when we go into coaching is this preventable? How could you get like better predictability? How would you like to, how could you react in such situations? Was the amount of slack the right one? Stuff like that, like how to handle it. It's not about saying them, no, you're not allowed to pull in any urgent ticket that comes in an operation environment, because that's not where things should go.
By the way, so there was a comment that was made to both of us in there that made me think of something on this. And that is, you know, in the Scrum Guide, it talks about product owners are accountable for the health of the backlog. I'm summarizing, of course, but they're accountable for it. And they're allowed to delegate tasks. They're allowed to ask other people to pick things up. And there's actually no limit on what they're allowed to delegate in the Scrum Guide, but they're ultimately accountable. And so if a stakeholder comes in and says, why was that delivered this sprint instead of this other thing, they should have an answer for them, and they should be able to speak to it. We chose to do that because this is where we saw the perceived value. Now, maybe we were wrong, but they can at least speak to it. They are ultimately, you know, accountable for that. And so when we talk about, well, what gets delegated and what doesn't get delegated, when we're coaching people and when we're talking about prioritization, that's one of the things I always come back to is, are you going to be able to speak to this? Are you going to be able, you know, when someone brings up that backlog and says, why is that there? What value does this deliver? Can you answer that question? Because if you can't, then you're not being effectively accountable to it. And then past that, as long as you can do that, cool. Yeah, then you're at least meeting that role of product owner.
Here is one person who has also quite an interesting question. I think also maybe can be tanged also with the remote working at the moment. But the question is, like, we have one product for businesses which are located in different cities, which means that there would be 4 POs for the 8 teams. Do you have any experiences like this?
One product for businesses. That's a quite interesting question, because at the end of the day, there you're coming to the situation that we just mentioned beforehand. We say, okay, well, one product owner for 2 teams or 2 product owners for 2 teams. At the end of the day, I'd be interested, like if you say like 4 businesses, how close are the businesses related to each other or not? At the end of the day, you will end up in a remote team, which was a little bit of like nobody liked it 2 years ago. And nowadays it's, to be honest, I've never met Fia, I never met Daniel, and we're able to work with each other because people are getting used to it. So let's cross out the different cities. The other thing that you're having or that you're facing is that you're having like multiple product owners for different businesses. And if we reduce it to this question, the point is like, how can we handle that? How much alignment do we need between the different businesses or business lines? And is it better to have like one face to the customer? Because at the end of the day, we need to negotiate all the things because there are a couple of dependencies on there. Or are these independent products who can be like developed, deployed, and sold independently to maybe a joint stock of customers, which would be like a rather more indication for having separated product owners. At the end of the day, like there are a lot of other influences that come in. There may be like one very senior product owner who knows some customers better. The other one is quite new. There are a couple of social things in this question packed as well. So there is not that one size fits all answer to it, but there are a couple of questions that we can think about or like consolidate when we're trying to find the right product owner setup, to say so.
One of the things I'll add to that, and of course, if you're already in this situation, you're well into it. So you know, I mean, you might be doing a little bit of back work, but if you were to, let's say we went back in time a little bit and we were going to approach this problem right from the start, one of the things I'd often recommend is really get a team with a product owner and a product, you know, get that working in a way that you're happy with in your organization and see what that looks like and see what your needs are. I know a lot of organizations, especially nowadays, really just try to go out and like, I've got 30 teams, I've never done this before, and we're just going to do it, right? And then they end up having to figure, well, did we do it right? Because there are a lot of different schools of thought on this, right? And when we're talking about scaling up to many teams, there are a number of different scaling frameworks out there, and many of them are good, but they serve different purposes. They have different strengths and weaknesses. And so if I look at Less, for example, as a scaling framework, they would say, hey, I have it's one product owner, done. If I look at Scrum at Scale, they're going to look at they're going to potentially have a bunch of different product owners, but also having some structures for them to connect to each other and make sure they're aligned with each other. If I look at Safe, it's going to be something different. They have a really robust structure, especially for very, very large groups of teams all working on the same efforts. And ideally, what I want to do is before I start making these decisions, understand how things work with one team delivering one product with one product owner focused on that, and then start making those decisions based off of my understanding of what I need to go from that point to the next point. Because frankly, all the answers are good answers for someone.
You want to add something, Lothar, or should we take the next?
I think I'm okay with it. Maybe let's just jump to another question because I see like there are a bunch of open questions still in the chat.
Yeah, let's take the next one. So how do you determine the value delivered by a feature or subset of features? And is the value always determined in like money values? Or what if the product isn't yet making money for the company? Then what? What's the value then?
I share what I've done. Yeah, so definitely value is not always measured in dollar signs, right? You can make the argument academically that it always turns into that, but it's not. And what if you're a nonprofit? Your value may have nothing to do with dollar signs. It may be people cured of a disease, or development on research, or people fed. So value does not have to equal money. The litmus test I really like to use is if I sat down with an engaged customer, could I explain the value in a way that they would understand and then also value? So for example, if I'm a financial institution, there are things around security that I might say to a customer, doing this work will make it less likely that a hacker can get your personal information. Awesome. There's no money, there's no price tag on that, there's no feature I'm selling, but that is valuable. Yes, please put that in the backlog. I really frankly wish more financial institutions would put that in their backlog. My personal information would probably be a lot less places right now. You know, hey, by doing this is a platform upgrade. It's technical. We're not going to get into the technical details, but if we don't do this in 1 year, we're going to have all kinds of problems come up, and then we're going to get locked into this massive upgrade and not be able to work on any features because they're going to get rid of this system. Cool. I can still understand that as a customer and see the value. Hey, we're going to space this out and work it in between features, and that slows down feature delivery, but it means that we won't have to stop feature delivery later on. Fantastic. So that's the litmus test I use. Could I sit down with an engaged customer, and would they understand, even if they don't understand the details, would they understand why it's valuable?
Just read the same question because it's in our chat, and I had like a completely different thought on the questions, and I answered like just from the back, saying like, what if the company is not making any money yet? And let's take it from the academic perspective, because fortunately I'm an economist, and I learned at some point in time something about like the BCG matrix, where we heard something that, okay, in your product portfolio you should have your your cash cows, your rising stars, and of course your question marks, because the matter of fact that we're earning our money today doesn't mean that of course, we'll make it tomorrow. So yes, you should have some question marks in your product portfolio. That's what we're learning or teaching economists since decades. Then the next question is the value always determined in dollars? Brought me to the point like, okay, well, products I'm working on or I'm supporting are agile transitions. And I'm just wondering, like, are you able to put a price tag on like which value will your agile transition bring you? I doubt. But at the end of the day, I fully understand that every agile transition has any kind of target state and any kind of goal and any kind of owner in the companies we're working in, because there is someone who may be the CIO, who may be the CEO, or who is the head of any kind of department or any product line, saying, well, at the end of the day, we think that, or like we're sure that there is any kind of competitive advantage if we're delivering this product or if we're developing this product in a different kind of way. At the end of the day, this will support the value, or like the agile transition will support the value that we're generating in the with the product. Maybe because we're able to cope changes better, maybe because we deliver the product more efficient, maybe for a couple of reasons, I don't know. And these are very specific to the company and to their situation. But at the end of the day, it's like not always the dollars, but as Daniel mentioned, at the end of the day, like we need to have a look on this as well, because this is going to pay our bills. But you can't put everything in dollars at the end of the day.
Yeah. There's been a lot of really, really good questions, and unfortunately we are running out of time as usual when we have these good questions and very active audience joining us. But before we end the discussion, we have a community that I actually posted about in the chat some minutes ago. And if you join the community tomorrow at the same time as this webinar started today, so at 4 p.m. as European time, there's going to be a lean coffee. And our colleagues Rochelle and Regina are going to continue to talk about product ownership also tomorrow in the lean coffee. So it would be really nice if you have questions that now didn't get answers, or you want to know more about the product ownership, that you just join the community. It's free to join, and then you find the event there so you can sign up for the lean coffee tomorrow. I also posted Daniel's and Lothar's and also my contact details on LinkedIn. So if you have any questions, you can also reach out to us separately, and we can of course answer any of your questions. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Lothar, for your presentation about the product ownership and answering all the tricky questions. Do you want to give still some last tips and tricks for the product owners and other roles listening to us today to just cut the webinar?
You go ahead, Lothar.
Just wondering, like all the questions that are still unanswered in the chat, and thought about like, okay, what to answer in the one or the other question. And the two things that I like that I had in mind regarding most of the questions. The one is like, always think about like, what is your customer's benefit and what would be a good next step for the customer. And the second thing is allow yourself to grow, or allow your product owners to grow along that journey. That's basically maybe my takeaway for the remaining questions and the thoughts that we shared today.
Yeah, I guess the two things that I'll put in, one, springboarding off of what you said. I know I was glancing through other questions, and some of them are really in depth, some of them are really complex, and they're interesting. I see a lot of companies try to tackle their hardest problems in their earliest efforts with Agile. So to Lothar's point about giving room to grow, like give yourself room to grow. Don't make the World Cup your first soccer game or football game for everyone not in the US. Tackle the easier problems first, the things where you can have one product owner focus on a clear product with clear mission, and then have a team that's really focused around that. Let yourself have that experience first before jumping into the really scary stuff. It'll pay off, right? That learning will really, really pay off, and you'll succeed more in the more complex spaces. And then last thing, remember, the whole point of having this product owner in place is to keep the customer in the conversation, right? That's the reason it's here. Other frameworks like extreme programming don't have one. The reason that this product owner is here in Scrum is to keep the customer in the conversation. And so if you're a product owner, remember, that's the reason that was put in there. So keep that in mind with what you're doing day to day.
Super. Cool. We can also share actually the unanswered questions with Regina and Rochelle for tomorrow, so that they get a little bit of insight on what we didn't have time to answer on, and the discussions will be ongoing in the Lean Coffee. So hope to see you all there tomorrow with the girls. It was really nice to see so many of you here, familiar faces and new faces. This is a recording, so you can also share it around with your network also after the live session today. So it's going to be posted probably this week still on our site, so stay tuned also for that. Hope to see you next month. Next month's theme is going to be quite big. It's going to be about digital transformations. So stay tuned for that. More info also on LinkedIn, for example. So you can also go and follow us there to stay on point. We hope to see you next month again. And thanks, guys, and have a nice continuous day.
Thanks, everyone.